a new segment I'm going to call Genre Defining, where I take a look at a genre of video games and define it. Before you ask, yes, I'm the most creative person I know.
If you don't know, video games can be really whatever the hell you want them to be.
Ooh, I want a game where I can play rock music with a guitar controller! Yeah, I love video games!
But as with anything and everything, it's incredibly important to categorize things. It just makes things easier when talking about things. I mean, we do it for everything. Hell, we literally gave each individual finger a name. Like, what was the point of that?
Because it's important! I mean, I like all my fingers, but I'm a real big ring finger fan.
So when it comes to video games, since they can be so wildly different from game to game, of course we have different categories or genres to put them in. And there are loads of different genres to account for all the different things video games can be.
And that is the point of genre defining. Taking a look at all the different genres of games and the genre defining titles within them. Holy shit, that name makes so much sense.
Anyways, let's start this journey with something simple. When the term video game is brought up, what's the first thing you think of? Quick, just go. First thing that pops into your head.
Rock music and guitar controllers. That's not right. Give me a second.
Chances are you think of platformers. Which makes sense if you think about it. Running and jumping from point A to point B, it's so simple. Why wouldn't it be the first thing you think of? I mean, platformers are arguably the simplest genre of video games, or at least the simplest to understand. At their very simplest, it's just reach a goal. You can run and jump. And at their most complex, it's a lot more complex, that's for damn sure.
But the most likely reason platformers is one of the first things you think of when the term video game is brought up is because it was one of the first video game genres.
The game credited with being the first ever platformer game is an arcade game called Space Panic from 1980, but there are some abnormally large quotation marks around the word platformer here. Like, look at this. What even is this? You can't even jump here. How does this count? But still, even before this, what did you have? Pong? Space Invaders? Breakout? I mean, you are controlling a character here and running around, so I guess you do have a skeleton of a platformer here.
But seriously, calling this game a platformer is like saying the guy that invented bread also invented sandwiches at the same time. Like, sure, but no, we didn't.
If you want to see running and jumping, then we're going to need to jump forward a year to 1981 with the release of Nintendo's Donkey Kong. And see, look, there we go, running and jumping. Now, this is a platformer. Donkey Kong was a pretty big hit in arcades and really put Nintendo on the map in terms of video games. But if we want to see early platformers on home consoles, well then look no further than Activision's Pitfall on the Atari 2600. How do you play this? I will give them credit for an Atari 2600 game, this ain't bad at all, but I just have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing.
So at this point, the platforming genre is pretty basic, but the concept is still there. But in 1985, Nintendo would strike gold again, would change the platforming genre forever with Super Mario Bros. What, were you expecting a big reaction? It's fucking Super Mario Bros. We all know it was big.
So Super Mario Bros. Was a pretty huge game. I mean, Nintendo launched this game along with the NES, which was right after the video game crash in 1983, so this game needed to be good. And, well, it's no surprise to anyone at this point. It was. It was simple enough to be enjoyed by everyone, but did enough unique things to make it a fresh new experience for video games. And so now a lot more platformers start to be made. Platformers with robots, platformers with ninjas, platformers with bubblegum, platformers with bullshit! A pretty common trope with early platformers was to make them unfairly difficult. Probably because this is when home console games were actually starting to be quality, and the only other quality games at this point were insultingly difficult to make more money. So before developers realized that people actually wanted to have fun playing a game, the main design philosophy was to just throw a bunch of bullshit at the player and tell them to get good. But eventually, games started to become more fair and more in the player's favor, and we got some of the greatest games of all time. Super Mario World, Super Metroid, Donkey Kong Country, just to name a few.
This is great! We're actually starting to get some quality titles! I don't think anything could possibly ruin this streak of good games. Right?
Wait, there's a 26th letter of the alphabet? So it's the mid-90s, and now we're starting to get consoles that can run games in true 3D, and woo! We got some good games, and we got a lot of mediocre to bad. Super Mario 64 was a landmark title. This game showed the world what a fun, well-made 3D platformer could look like, and everybody loved it. So naturally, every developer under the sun decided to capitalize on that and started making their own not as good platformers. Like, there were some good ones hidden in there, but most were just okay.
But here's the thing. We went from the people making platformers to just Nintendo and a couple other studios to everyone making platformers back to just Nintendo and a couple other studios.
When the 6th generation of consoles rolled around, the platformer craze started to die down. And by the 7th generation, barely any platformers were being made. I mean, of course, it's not like there were no platformers, but we went from having arguably too many to barely having any.
I find it kind of weird that the most video gamey kinds of video games really haven't been getting that much attention lately. Like, despite being the first thing most people think of when video games are brought up, platformers really haven't been given that much love.
Though recently, we've been seeing a resurgence in the platformer genre. I think now we're only seeing platformers from studios that are actually taking the time and effort to make something good and enjoyable that people will actually have fun with. Mostly. I mean, most platformers are mainly coming from indie developers. Games like Shovel Knight, Hollow Knight, Celeste, A Hat in Time are all examples of smaller studios really taking the time to make something great.
And of course, there are still some bigger companies making quality platformers too. Like, we got Crash Bandicoot 4 in 2020, and I think we can always count on Nintendo for a good platformer. And sure, we might have gotten some stinkers in the past few years, but for the most part, I think things are looking up for the platformer genre.
Platformers are one of, if not my absolute favorite genre of video games. I love the seemingly simple nature of them, but also seeing how crazy you can get with the movement in some of them. It's such a pure experience, easy to pick up and play, but if you take the time to actually master them, you could feel like the greatest player to ever live. And they're usually the perfect length too, not too short, and they don't drag on for longer than they need to. And yeah, with some games, I get my fill, and at the same time I want them to keep going forever. I'm looking at you too. But even still, I absolutely love platformers and probably always will.
You know, all this platformer talk has really put me in the mood for playing one. Although I don't really know what I feel like playing, so let's just turn the TV on and see what we get. Damn it, how does this keep happening to me?